On a February night in 2004, a nursing student crashed her car on a lonely New Hampshire mountain road. When police arrived 7 minutes later, they found something that would haunt investigators for 2 decades. The car was there, her belongings were scattered inside, but Maura Murray had simply vanished into the White Mountain wilderness. 21 years later, a piece of evidence would finally emerge from those dark woods. Evidence that would change everything her family thought they knew about that night. February 9, 2004, the White Mountains of New Hampshire stretched endlessly under a bitter winter sky. Route 112 cut through this wilderness like a scar, a narrow ribbon of asphalt bordered by towering pines and deadly drop-offs. The temperature was dropping toward zero. Fresh snow had turned to ice on the winding mountain road. This was the kind of place where cell phones had no signal, where the nearest house might be miles away, and where the forest could swallow a person whole. At 7:27 p.m., on this desolate stretch of road near Woodsville, New Hampshire, a black Saturn sedan would slam into a snowbank. The impact would set in motion one of America's most enduring mysteries. But this story doesn't begin with a crash. It begins with a young woman who seemed to have everything to live for. Maura Murray was 21 years old, with the kind of determined smile that suggested she could overcome anything. A nursing student at the University of Massachusetts, she ran track, maintained good grades, and worked part-time to help pay for college. Those who knew her described a young woman with 2 distinct sides. There was Maura the achiever, disciplined, focused, always pushing herself to run faster, study harder, be better. But there was also Maura the wanderer, someone who loved the mountains of New Hampshire, who would disappear for weekend hiking trips, returning with stories of hidden waterfalls and abandoned trails. Her father, Fred Murray, had taught her to love those mountains. Every summer since childhood, the Murray family had rented a cabin in the White Mountains. Maura knew these roads, these forests. She knew their beauty and their dangers. But in the weeks before her disappearance, something had changed. Her friends noticed she seemed distracted, distant. She'd received a mysterious phone call at work that left her so upset she had to leave her shift early. She'd been having problems with her boyfriend, Billy. And just days before, she'd been caught using a stolen credit card number. On February 9th, Maura Murray would tell her professors she had a family emergency. She would withdraw almost all her money from the bank, $280 in cash. She would pack her car with clothes, snacks, and alcohol. Then she would drive north toward the mountains she loved. She would never be seen again. At approximately 7 p.m., Maura Murray's black 1996 Saturn was traveling west on Route 112. The road was treacherous, patches of ice hidden beneath fresh snow, sharp curves that appeared suddenly in headlight beams. What happened next remains a mystery. No other vehicles were involved. No witnesses saw the actual crash. But at 7:27 p.m., Maura's Saturn slammed nose first into a snowbank near the weathered barn curve, a spot locals knew as particularly dangerous. The damage was significant, but not catastrophic. The front bumper was crumpled, the windshield spiderwebbed, but the car was still drivable. Inside, investigators would later find a telling collection of items: maps of Vermont and New Hampshire, directions to a resort in Bartlett, bottles of alcohol, and Maura's nursing textbooks. But where was Maura? At 7:34 p.m., just 7 minutes after the crash, a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood was returning home when he spotted the Saturn. He pulled over and approached the driver's side window. A young woman was standing beside the car. She appeared shaken but not injured. When Atwood offered to call police, she insisted she'd already called AAA and help was on the way. She seemed anxious for him to leave. Atwood drove to his house just 100 yards away and called 911 anyway. When police arrived at 7:46 p.m., just 19 minutes after Atwood's encounter, the Saturn was still there, but Maura Murray was gone. She had vanished into the February darkness, leaving behind only questions and a scene that made no sense. Within hours, the New Hampshire State Police launched a massive search operation. Helicopters swept over hundreds of square miles of dense forest. Search and rescue teams with tracking dogs combed through snow-covered trails and abandoned logging roads. The searchers faced brutal conditions: Temperatures plummeted to 15 below zero. Snow was 3 feet deep in some areas. If Maura had wandered into this wilderness wearing only the light jacket witnesses described, she could have died of hypothermia within hours. But the tracking dogs led investigators to a troubling discovery. Maura's scent trail led east from the crash site for approximately 100 yards, then simply disappeared, as if she had vanished into thin air. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months. Volunteers from across New England joined the search. They checked every abandoned cabin, every hunting shelter, every cave within a 50-mile radius. They found nothing. It was as if Maura Murray had simply walked into the forest and been erased from existence. In the abandoned Saturn, investigators cataloged the remnants of a life interrupted. Each item told part of a story, but together they painted a picture that made no sense. Item number 1. Handwritten directions to Bartlett, New Hampshire, a ski resort town about 40 miles from the crash site. The paper was creased from folding and refolding, as if Maura had studied these directions carefully. But why Bartlett? She had no reservations, no friends there waiting. Item number 2. Maura's cell phone, found inside the car with a dead battery. The last call in her phone records was to her boyfriend Billy at 4:37 p.m., nearly 3 hours before the crash. After that, silence. If she was in trouble, why didn't she try to call for help? Item number 3. Alcohol. Boxes of wine, vodka bottles, Kahlua, enough alcohol for a party, or enough to drink away whatever was troubling her. One bottle of wine had been opened and partially consumed. Was Maura drinking while driving? Was she planning to drink alone in some remote location? But perhaps the most haunting artifact was what wasn't there. Maura's backpack, the one her family said she always carried, was missing. So were her car keys, her wallet, and most importantly, her warm winter coat. These missing items suggested something investigators didn't want to consider, that Maura Murray's disappearance might not have been an accident at all. For 21 years, the forests of New Hampshire kept their secrets. Search teams returned every spring as snow melted, hoping to find some trace of Maura Murray. Television crews arrived each anniversary, asking the same unanswered questions. Her father, Fred Murray, never stopped looking. He spent his retirement hiking every trail, checking every abandoned cabin, following every lead. He aged decades in those 21 years, but his determination never wavered. Then in October 2025, everything changed. A team of researchers using advanced ground-penetrating radar was conducting an unrelated geological survey in the Franconia Notch area, 15 miles from the crash site. They were looking for old logging roads when their equipment detected an anomaly buried beneath decades of forest debris. What they found would answer some questions about Maura Murray's disappearance and raise others that were even more disturbing. Buried 3 feet underground, wrapped in a tarp that had somehow survived 2 decades of New Hampshire winters, investigators found Maura's missing backpack. Inside, her wallet, containing her driver's license and student ID, her car keys, a water bottle, and something that would change everything investigators thought they knew about that February night. The note was brief, written in Maura's handwriting and dated February 9, 2004, the day she disappeared. It read, "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. If you find this, tell my family I love them. I'm going where no one can find me." But here's what investigators couldn't explain. The backpack was found 15 miles from the crash site, in an area that would have been impossible for Maura to reach on foot in the time available. Someone had buried that backpack, someone who knew exactly where to hide it so it would never be found. The discovery of Maura's backpack has forced investigators to reconstruct that February night from the beginning. The evidence now suggests a chilling possibility. Maura Murray may not have vanished into the wilderness alone. Theory 1. After the crash, Maura accepted help from a passing motorist, someone who seemed trustworthy, who offered to drive her to safety. Instead, this person drove her deep into the mountains, where something terrible happened. The buried backpack suggests premeditation, someone who knew these forests well enough to hide evidence where it would never be found. Theory 2. Maura had arranged to meet someone that night. The directions to Bartlett, the withdrawal of cash, the family emergency excuse, all part of a plan to disappear with someone she trusted. But the plan went wrong. The crash was an accident, but what happened afterward was not. The suicide note, if genuine, suggests Maura was in deeper psychological distress than anyone realized, but the location of the backpack raises disturbing questions. If Maura died by suicide, who buried her belongings 15 miles away? New Hampshire State Police have reopened the case with fresh resources and new technology. Ground-penetrating radar is being used to search the area where the backpack was found. DNA analysis is being conducted on trace evidence found with the note, but 21 years of wind, rain, and snow have erased most traces of what really happened that night. The person who buried Maura's backpack, whether friend or foe, may be the only one who knows the truth. Today, Route 112 looks much the same as it did on February 9, 2004. The same dangerous curves, the same towering pines, the same vast wilderness that can swallow secrets whole. But something has changed. The discovery of Maura Murray's backpack has proven that someone out there knows what happened to her. Someone who has kept that secret for 21 years. Maura's family finally has some answers. They know she didn't simply vanish into the forest. They know someone else was involved in her disappearance. They know she thought of them in her final moments. But the biggest question remains. In a case where every clue leads to more mysteries, where evidence appears decades after hope seemed lost, what other secrets might these mountains still be hiding? And somewhere in New Hampshire, someone knows exactly what happened to Maura Murray on that cold February night. The question is, will they ever tell?